Hello, everybody, and welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything rolls around fantasy, Premier League, and other stuff. My name is Sergio.
And my name is James.
I thought I'd chuck the and other stuff in because there might not be much football moving forward. And also today, we're not talking about FPL, but it's People's Poll Day. So, James, you want to do what you do, which is runners and riders and what won.
Michelle, was a very, very close vote between all three topics. One of the topics was to discuss the fair trade agreement, which has now been inserted by the Premier League, which effectively allows Newcastle United, for example, to agree sponsorship deals with, let's say, friends in Saudi Arabia. But until that agreement get passed through, the Premier League have to check if the value of the sponsorship deal is fair. So, Newcastle can't just say we've got an 80 million agreement for Mars bars with a company in Saudi Arabia. The Premier League's going to go, that's obviously not right. Go back to the drawing board and agree a proper valuation of fee.
Yeah, because rules like that exist in accounting, fair market value and making sure everything's done at arm's length and what have you. But generally, it's always done to stop people undervaluing stuff. Like you'd say, oh, this is, we see a story with Donald Trump. This is only worth this much, so I don't have to pay tax. Whereas in this situation, they're trying to prevent overvaluation of contracts and deals rather than undervaluation. But yeah.
Another option was to talk about the career of the magnificent Sergio Aguero.
Yes.
A player who has caused me more grief than I can care to tell you, because I think he's scored numerous goals against Tottenham over the last 10 years or so.
Who hasn't he scored a lot of goals against?
Best goals per minute ratio in Premier League history. Obviously, unfortunately, after moving to Barcelona, had to announce his retirement last week due to heart condition. Obviously suffered the last couple of years, really been suffering badly with injuries as well. Real shame that his career has ended so suddenly like this. One of the great Premier League forwards in history. The conversation that's won, however, and I think it's one because it's something that's very close to my heart and probably people want my views on it, is conversation around the Y word, a word that's used by Tottenham fans every single Tottenham game that I've ever been to. I've heard the word used, which is interesting when I reflect on a racism pod we did 2 years ago. And I said, I've never heard racism in a football ground, i.e. I've never heard black this or whatever.
Yeah.
But then that word gets sung 10 times over at every single Tottenham game that I've ever been to. And I think it's time, and part of the fact is Tottenham are probably going to bring this subject back up over the next 12 months or so, a time to look at the appropriateness of the word and if it should be used. So I'll put my hands up and say, we did a racism pod 25 months ago, shortly after the terrible abuse that England players suffered in Bulgaria, if you remember correctly. And I said on that podcast that I was going to stop using the Y word, just ever, basically. If my dad's listening to this, he's probably going to be thinking, fuck, I've just realized that my son hasn't used the word for 2 years. Yeah, shit. No, You're right, Dad. You sit next to me at games and you still use it and I don't. But my dad's situation is very different because he grew up in a family with Jewish background. I didn't. It was never forced upon me. I'm not religious in any way. My religion is Tottenham Hotspur, essentially. So I want to kind of talk through the history behind the word, why Tottenham fans use it.
When you say your dad grew up in a Jewish background, as in he was Jewish?
His mother's Jewish, yeah.
Right, so from that side, see, I never knew that you had any Jewish heritage in you whatsoever.
But to be honest, it's not something I particularly consider. To be honest, I don't consider myself religious or belonging to any group. As I said, my religion to me is my football club, basically. So, and by association of that, the Y word has become almost part of my religion, if you went, but part of my community group for the last 30 years or so. I think firstly, for those who don't know the kind of meanings behind the word, it's important in the first instance to kind of define what the word is. So essentially the word is, if you listen to many Jewish groups, they would describe the word as a racial slur. So the word kind of came to prominence in Britain in 1930s when Oswald Mosley was a British MP who became disillusioned with kind of mainstream politics, became the leader of the British Union of Fascist Group, which, doesn't need defining too much when we was about to go into a Second World War.
Precursor of the BNP, parallels with Nazi Germany.
Exactly that. The word was undertaken, the English version of the word was undertaken by Nazi Germany as a racial slur. And it was daubed on the walls predominantly in London's East End back in the 1930s. Tottenham has had a long-standing association of Jewish support, which goes back like over 100 years, basically. In the 1970s, it kind of turned into targeted abuse and systematic racism, basically, against Tottenham fans. That's how the word was used in those terms. I guess probably the first times it would have been used in a football context as a racist abuse to be thrown at Tottenham fans. The response of Tottenham fans, both Jewish and non-Jewish at the time, was to, in quote, reclaim the word and use it to push back against the racist haters and say, fine, if that's what you think we are, then fine, we're going to show support with our Jewish community and claim the word.
Yeah. It's interesting because I don't know statistically whether Tottenham have a smaller or larger Jewish fan base than other clubs, but I know it's probably not, right? I mean, I know a lot of my Jewish friends in North London. Being in North London, there's a strong Jewish community. Are Gooners. Loads of them.
Exactly that.
I could just think off the top of my head, I could name 12 to 15 people that I know who are Jewish and Gooners.
Well, there's a very prominent area which you could basically say is almost halfway between Tottenham and Arsenal, which is called, for those who don't live in London, which would be many of you, called Stamford Hill.
Correct.
Which is basically right smack in between Tottenham and Arsenal. And if you go to Stamford Hill, I promise you it's probably a little bit more Arsenal than Tottenham.
Exactly.
In fairness. And there are numbers of, I would say there are probably as many Jewish supporters who go to Arsenal now as there is Tottenham. I know, I don't know the percentage of that, but the percentage of match-going Jewish fans that now go to Tottenham is believed to be 5%.
Which actually is high.
Do you know what? In terms of the ratio of Jewish football fans going to football, it probably is one of the larger groups. But I think
in relation to, I was always surprised with how many Jewish people are in the UK. I mean, it's in the low hundreds of thousands, 200,000 to 300,000, compared to the Indian community, which is like 2 million. Yeah,
is that
mate.
Correct? Really?
Yeah. I remember looking at this a while ago, and I was blown away with how small the population is as a percentage of the whole.
Maybe they all think you're shit here and left.
Well, this is the thing. So I'm going to Google it while you talk, Jay, just to make sure. But I'm very sure when they did the last census and stuff, and I looked at the data, I was surprised with how low. I thought there'd be at least 1 million, for example.
I mean,
it's in the low 100,000. So if you think about the population of the country and how many are Jewish versus how many people turn up to Spurs and 5% being Jewish, that's a higher percentage than the average.
Yeah, I mean, genuinely, I've probably met as many Jewish Arsenal fans as Jewish Tottenham fans. Now, if we go back to like the 1970s and the 80s and
410,000, sorry.
Okay. That number was probably a lot higher. But David Dean was chairman of Arsenal. I'm sure David Dean's Jewish.
Yes, he is.
Your owners, Golden Sullivan, are
correct.
Both
correct.
Jewish. So, it's interesting to think that West Ham fans would perhaps, and this is not a dig specifically just at West Ham, we're going to kind of cover both sides of the story as best and as neutrally as I can, that would perhaps chant that word. And I know a lot of them obviously don't like your owners, and they're probably going to be on the way out in the next couple of years. But then you're chanting that racial slur, and obviously your owners belong to that religion, right? I mean, it's just not right. But then it flips the other way, right? So Tottenham chairman's Jewish as well, right? But the Tottenham fans sing it. So it's a really kind of
that's the most difficult part of this whole equation.
Yeah, it's so murky. It's so murky, and I accept that. And I am naturally, as someone who's gone to Tottenham every week for over 30 years now, is going to come to the defences of Tottenham, fellow Tottenham fans as best I can. It's just the natural, as a football fan, we all get tunnel vision, whether it's disagreeing with a referee decision, the way your fans are. Everyone thinks they've got the best fans in the world. Many people think they've got the best team in the world, best stadium, whatever. We all, as football fans, at one point or another, have tunnel vision. And I would put my hands up and say that for the majority of the last 30 years, I've had tunnel vision as a Tottenham supporter in reference to how the Y word is used. So Tottenham first started kind of really looking at the use of the Y word about, well, it probably goes back further than 10 years, but it really came to the fore 10 years ago. In 2013, the FA decided that the word was inappropriate, I think fairly correctly, and could amount to a criminal offence. Within weeks, 3 Tottenham fans were arrested for use of the word, and it caused outrage. And the problem is that Tottenham fans use the word, whether rightly or wrongly at this stage in the conversation, use the word as a term of endearment. It is never used by any Tottenham fan in the intent to cause offence or to be racist to any individuals. It's sung at our own players, for example. It's sung about ourselves in definition.
Yeah. You don't go and chant at somebody like you yids or anything like that.
No, and this isn't also not to say that
this
is also not to say that no Tottenham fan has ever been racist. Tottenham fans have been, of course, absolutely. But the way that Tottenham fans use the word is meant completely as endearment with no hateful intent meant. But I can certainly see, obviously, how others would perceive the word. Where that caused mass outrage was the fact that it had kind of been getting heightened, where the tensions between Tottenham and certain other clubs, where Tottenham fans were using the word as endearment, and opposition fans were using it as a racial slur. Now, it's not even necessarily the case that those fans even realised that they were using the word as a racial slur, because as far as they was concerned, the word equals Tottenham fan. The problem that
exactly that's the interesting thing here. If Chelsea fans, West Ham fans, whoever it may be, were using the Y word in chants against Spurs fans, it has nothing to do with Judaism. It's because it's Tottenham fans. If you called yourself, I don't know, the Chickens, they'd use that phrase as the one that's targeting Spurs fans. Which is what the point you're making is.
But that's not necessarily the case for 100%. Some, I'm sure, do use and mean it in racial intent.
But yeah,
but I think
the irony being that it's not meant as a racist slur. It is, but it's not meant by opposition fans in that way, which is where you get to the kind of, if there's too much confusion around it, there maybe needs to be a more black and white approach, which is zero tolerance, right?
Yeah, I mean, it needs open conversation before you get to the zero tolerance point, because what happened, obviously, with the anger with the 3 Tottenham fans who got arrested was, how can you arrest 3 Tottenham fans when there's probably 10,000 in the ground using it?
Correct.
These people were arrested in the stadium. It wasn't on the street. It was in the stadium. That could have been me that got arrested at the time comfortably. And also when the use of the word by opposition fans was obviously meant with hateful intent, but it wasn't meant by Tottenham fans, blurred the lines. And of course, when it went to the Crown Prosecution Service in 2014, they deemed that there was insufficient evidence to charge the 3 Tottenham fans because the context with which the word was being used did not cause offence. And it actually brought an even larger resurgence to what was happening with Tottenham fans and their use of the word. Because at that time, there was a lot of conflict amongst Tottenham fans with the fact at the time there was consideration in terms of moving the club to Stratford. There was a lot of rebellion against that. And then there was rebellion, obviously, against the fact that people were trying to stop Tottenham fans' usage of the word. I remember at the time, my opinion at the time was, you can't do that. There's other people being racist using the word. We're not. Why is it us getting punished? Which, when I reflect on it now, I've got more of an open mind and can see both sides. But it spawned a new song, which is still sung every Tottenham game you go to now, which is, they tried to stop us and look what it did. The thing I love most is.
Right.
And so it even became, from more than just using the word as, say, why army, it actually became a collective that you can't stop us using this word. And we're going to tell you can't stop us using this word. See, it became an act. It's become over the last 10 years as well, an act of defiance by Tottenham fans to say, you tried to take the word from us, a word that Tottenham fans believe they've reclaimed. Now, the term of reclaimment obviously blurs a lot of lines, because you could make an argument and case to say, how can anybody that doesn't belong to a particular minority group, how can they actually even reclaim a word? Where else is there examples of people who do not belong to a minority group reclaiming an actual word? Now, at the physical time in the 1970s, there was obviously a far larger scale of Jewish Tottenham fans that went to games. That's now not the case. And the lines got blurred even further last year when the Oxford English Dictionary, yes, the Oxford English Dictionary updated their definition of the word to include the words supporters or player of Tottenham Hotspur. It's in the dictionary. That's stupid. That's in the physical English dictionary, that's what the word means. So that could mean that I have no association to Jewish people, whatever, for example, and I've now been labeled with that word. But that's incredibly misleading. And that's from the definition of our language. That's not right. And to be fair, Tottenham have come out and said, like, that's incredibly misleading. You need to look at that and get it changed. So because the lines are so blurred, and clearly you can't just tell Tottenham fans, stop using the word, there's going to be counter against it, because the Tottenham fans who believe in using the word are going to constantly point and say, look, opposition fans are using it in a derogatory context to us. This is going to be the kind of back and forth argument. Until opposition fans stop using the word, then why are Tottenham fans going to stop using the word? And there'll be a lot of people listening to this going, I can't believe what I'm hearing, and may not even be aware, but I'm sure people who go and have ever been to Tottenham or played a game against Tottenham probably are aware of Tottenham's association with the Jewish community and stuff. I think what we need to do is kind of a fan-led over many, many years to educate people. And I know the most extreme experiences I've had, and the word doesn't offend me personally, it's worth saying, is in games that Tottenham have had against Chelsea and West Ham, particularly. More so people feel, oh, not Arsenal. No, not really. Because like I said, I think that there's a lot of Jewish community around where Arsenal play football and stuff as well, right? So this is not to say I've never heard Arsenal fans chanting anything badly at Tottenham, but the real kind of hatred level that comes with the word, I've experienced more in games against Chelsea and West Ham. It's worth saying that particularly in Chelsea's case, over the last 3 or 4 years, they have taken huge strides to try and educate their supporters in terms of what the words mean. I'm not sure if that sort of same thing has been happening at West Ham. And this isn't mean to specifically dig out West Ham, but the one game that made me think, wow, this is more than just a Y word conversation, was a game, I'm pretty sure it was a game in 2012 when we played you. And for new listeners, we should probably define, it's probably clear by now that I support Tottenham. Suj supports West Ham. Suj was not at the game, so can't be accused of certainly shouting any of these things.
How do you know?
I know that you weren't, because you don't travel far beyond Westfield Shopping Centre, mate. No, so I know you don't.
Well, in 2012, we weren't quite there, but yeah.
You were probably in Russia in the time, weren't you? Maybe.
That was 2002, 10 years out.
That's like your football knowledge, mate. It's normally about 10 years out. So in that particular game, it went from get the usual nonsense, which is obviously derogatory, where people bring up, say, like foreskin and stuff like that, to in that particular game, and bearing in mind, I would have been the opposite end of the ground from the West Ham fans, to chants about Holocaust, Adolf Hitler, and making gas noises. And wow. And you actually, if you put yourself in that setting and go, Tottenham and West Ham are playing a London derby, what the fuck has what happened in Germany 70 years earlier got to do with this?
Yeah.
And that was the first time I really thought, we need to think about this. Now, my decision to stop using the word a couple of years ago was born out of, I think, the heightened scrutiny with what was happening, obviously, in racism in society, and obviously particularly in football. And also as someone who'd had a child a year earlier and going, well, I need to start thinking, maybe one day he's going to want to know what this word means and how do I want to explain it. Well, I want to be in a position where I explain it properly and I go, I don't want you to use that word, son. That's where I want to be at with it. Now, I don't blame my father in any way. I can't ever remember the conversation. I think it was always sold to me of this is who we are, not just by my father, but just people by association of Tottenham. Yeah, almost all Tottenham fans I meet refer to themselves by usage of that's who we are. But I'm not sure that many Tottenham fans understand the connotation of what the word means. So I give an example of why this conversation is really difficult. And we had loads of responses to a tweet I sent out last night about people's feelings on the word. I had 3 DMs last night amongst a number of DMs about the subject, all from Tottenham fans who feel very differently. And this is kind of 3 cases. And I'm obviously not going to name the people involved because it's a private conversation. One, a Jewish Tottenham fan who believes that going to Tottenham and being able to use that word is the only time that he feels he can be himself. This is a Jewish person who wants to keep using the word at football matches, believes the word is obviously using the term of endearment, and it's important to feel that affiliation as a Jewish football fan who supports a team that has a Jewish connection and still feels they could be a part of that. Second DM is from another Jewish Tottenham fan who feels deeply embarrassed by the words that it's used and feels embarrassed about it all game long, every single game, and wants to see the name completely dropped. Then you got a third person who DMs me and says, I'm not Jewish. I've always used this word. Just on you bringing up the conversation, I'm never going to use the word again because I don't truly know what it means. I just know that's what we are, but doesn't understand that the word obviously brings on racial connotations and hurt to so many different people. And that's part my view on it as well. It's difficult when you've used something as part of a belonging for 25 plus years to make a decision to say no. But my view came to be that if I was singing it and it offended one person, then it just wasn't worth it anymore. It just wasn't worth it. And I think it's well and good for Tottenham fans to look at it and say we reclaimed the word in the 1970s. And the use of the word has always been incredibly well intentioned by Tottenham fans on the whole. But I think now we've moved to a point where we need to say this isn't right. I'll give you a perfect example, Sergio. So obviously, since I'd made that decision, we've obviously had lockdown. We've had the Black Lives Matter movement and stuff. So every football match, the players take the knee. And then as soon as everyone claps in the ground, no problem. And as soon as that stops, the White Army chant goes up. How can that be right? When you honestly just break it down simply as that, we all applaud players taking the knee for diversity, etc. And then as soon as it finishes, the chant goes up. And it's not meant as offense in any way, but it just doesn't sit right anymore. Does that make sense, Serge?
Massively. These kind of socio-political situations and scenarios I find fascinating and interesting, and generally things that I have an opinion on and can have an interesting conversation about. I'm struggling here a little bit because we've established that it's felt to be racist by the Jewish community, therefore it is racist, let's say. Yep. There's no debate about that. Many people are moving away from it. And so I think we're all kind of in agreement. The majority of people are in agreement. The majority of people, not all, that they'd like to see it removed. So then remove it. It's one of those things, So I'm trying to then look at the other side of the coin. I'm just trying to find and think about other similar situations, where this has kind of happened. And I am struggling a little bit, but I'm thinking about take rap culture in America. For example, black rappers use the N-word regularly in songs and with each other and what have you. And again, it's a scenario where when we use it to each other, it's a term of endearment or us just speaking. But when other people use it to us, it's racist. This is a similar to when Spurs fans use the Y word, it's endearment. When other people don't, it's not. And unfortunately, I think the reality is that you have to pick one way or the other. If it's going to be, you can't use it yourselves and then not expect that other people are going to use it inappropriately. Not that they should, but they're going to use it inappropriately. So I think it really, unfortunately, is massively going to start with Spurs fans not using it, because it takes the power away from the opposition fans.
The argument of we'll stop using it when other teams stop using it. And I would definitely say, by the way, I mean, that case I used with West Ham was, I'm going back 9 years. I'm pretty sure it was a game in 2012, late 2012. I've never heard it anywhere near as bad as that since then. That's the one and only time I've ever heard gas noises and stuff like that. It was like genuinely a little bit shocking that day. And I'm sure there were plenty of West Ham fans who are embarrassed about issues, Chelsea fans embarrassed about Arsenal fans, whomever, right? I know that, for example, Leeds United, because it was kind of the first time they played at Tottenham for many years with obviously fans, put an advert in their program before they played Leeds to try and educate in their previous home game, to try and educate fans to say, look, please don't use this word. This is what it means, which is good, right? We're taking real strides in trying to explain things.
Yeah.
You use the term of obviously rap culture and how the word's used. If Tottenham were singing "We're the N-word army," Jesus Christ, we'd all be in prison, right?
And if it's racist, it's racist. I don't think there's degrees
and this is the point.
Of racism. So that's why I think, if we've come to the conclusion as a society that it is a racist slur, it's unacceptable to use, then we shouldn't accept it any more than we would accept the N-word or any other racist term you can use.
But I also get the perspective. Well, I'm trying to understand the perspective of, say, the 2,500 Spurs Jewish fans who are going every week, and as it seems right now, half of them do want to continue using the word. So Tottenham did some research 2 years ago before lockdown, and they do this regularly, fan engagement, to try and get the opinion on the Y word. Tottenham, is worth saying, just for clarification, don't sell any branding or any association with Y word. They will never, according to what we read in The Athletic, they will never even interact with anybody on social media who has the Y word in their handle, on their bio, or anything. They just don't exist. Not that Tottenham Hotspur's social media account is dropping replies at people randomly, but they that's like a rule. They just will not go near that. For the 2,500, I'd say half of them do want to use it. In that study, Tottenham engaged with 23,000 fans, and I responded to that survey. So, I mean, we can call it 40% of the fans are going to games.
It's a significant number.
23,000 is not 230, right? It's a significant number.
Yeah.
And there's a growing increase when they do these surveys of people want the word to be used less and less and less. But it is still around about 50% who are happy for that to be used. And within that, there are Jewish people who want the word still to be used. In fact, the Jewish people who have come to me and said, we want to keep using the word, I feel stronger about it than the non-Jewish people who are using the words, in terms of that I said, that identity, that's something of belonging, almost like a defiance that goes back in history. So it's not a case of all Jewish fans at Tottenham want the word stopped, because that's not true. But then the other side are obviously, I think, more for those who want it and okay, they feel that sense of belonging and stuff, fine. My argument would be that's very different to the one who's actually embarrassed all game long and feels intimidated. Many of you probably would have seen the words of David Baddiel, who wrote a book 10 years ago. I can't remember the name of the book, Serge. It will come to me. But he launched a Y Word campaign 10 years ago. And he's obviously a Chelsea fan. Yeah. And obviously for him, where he hears the word amongst his sets of supporters, it's obviously thrown about in an aggressive nature. And it's something that he's obviously found quite intimidating. But again, to go back to your point, Serge, I think most Chelsea fans or fans of other clubs use the word because that's what Tottenham fans call themselves.
Exactly. It allows us something to throw back.
And it allows...
Jews don't count was David Baddiel's book.
Exactly. It allows open racism, because even that, the fact that Tottenham fans use it kind of gives an undertone that it's okay for, let's say, the less educated everyday person just to use the term back at Tottenham fans.
Yeah.
And then there's every chance that they'll go to court and they might get off of it and stuff. So for me, I think this needs to be, and this isn't something that's just going to stop in a day or two, but this is a podcast I've wanted to do for quite a while, to kind of open the conversation and put it out, because this is what we need to do with these sort of things, is have the open conversation and put it out there. And I'm not against anybody, any Tottenham fan who wants to keep using the word at the moment. Weirdly, like, I understand that. Like, I've never said to my dad, stop using the word, and I'm never going to. If my dad wants to use it, it's up to my dad. I get it. My dad's used the word for over 50 years and stuff. I get it. It's not something, it's not like my dad's standing there shouting it on his own. He's there with 10,000 others or so who feel part of a group and feel deeply like they need to hold on to this word. It's not something that's just going to be, stop it. It's not going to work like that. Tottenham want to encourage dialogue and understanding and education. I think, again, particularly say following the Black Lives Matter movement and stuff last year, we need to be more open and understand and be less receptive to the open conversations, because I imagine that most Tottenham fans, if they sat down with a Jewish person who's offended by the word and the Jewish person explained to them why they're so offended by the word, would probably instantly stop using it.
Yep.
And I think that's the next direction of where the conversation needs to go. It's not gonna change overnight. And the biggest thing for me is that if Tottenham fans stop using it, then the hatred from elsewhere will completely stop.
I agree with you. Not overnight, but it will.
And it will become a word that's, I mean, to go back to the racism pod, kind of our conclusion was like, you can't get rid of this overnight. No. We need to influence, as well. I go and refer back to the fact that I have a child and my decision on it, because we need to influence the next generation of children. We're not going to systematically kill racism in 6 months or a year because of a certain movement. We need to educate the next generation who just will not tolerate and do not grow up with it around them in society. And that's the biggest thing for me, is it's not even the Tottenham fans necessarily even using it, because again, they do not mean it with any hurtful intent. They mean it as endearment. But I think Tottenham fans need to stop using it so that other fans stop using it and this conversation stops. And it's going to be some difficult conversations and a lot of changing. I don't think like any Tottenham fan should go to prison for using the Y word and stuff, right? I've used it for 25 plus years, and had only ever used it as a term of endearment and the kind of community belonging. Now I feel differently about it. And I think that's me being educated has made that decision.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating topic of discussion. I'll be interested for you listeners to jump in on Twitter and the conversation and keep it moving and start spreading the word. Share this podcast with anybody and everybody you think it's relevant to. It's funny. It's hard.
So many Tottenham fans are going to disagree with this opinion, by the way. You know that. So many.
Well, I don't. I suppose I feel like a bit of a passenger on this pod because it's very black. It's quite black and white for me as a neutral who understands the racism. Just it's racist, therefore we don't do it. So I'm interested to learn and listen to you as a
presumably you must have heard the word at West Ham.
Chanting at you,
specifically.
No,
never heard it, and admit that you sit quite far from your away fans.
Far enough that it just has never been chanted at you guys.
So you've never heard a fan at West Ham say the Y word?
Not as a chant. I might have heard the odd person shout it. It might have been the odd person shout it.
That's what I'm saying. So
never as a chant or anything. Yeah. It's not. But I know. Obviously, I'm wholly aware about it. It just is wrong. But I've heard other stuff chanted that I completely disagree with as well. I've heard racist stuff chanted at Heung-min Son, for example, and that kind of thing. So, again, it's always been the isolated idiot as opposed to a chant from hundreds of fans. So, Yeah, very difficult, but I'm fascinated to hear the Spurs side of it. So.
A words you often use in reference to football fans is tribalism, right? And that's why I don't think you can just go in and say stop, because
you need to replace it with something.
That approach was tried and it made things worse, basically. So
yeah, I mean, one of the things that was on my mind is what do you replace it with? And
it doesn't work. Do you think I haven't thought of that?
Trust me, it does. Most football fans would agree that Tottenham should henceforth be known as the Cocks.
Yeah, Cock Army.
And then we go from there.
We'll have that.
Indeed. Patrons, or not patrons, all listeners, thank you so much for tuning into this People's Poll. If you need additional content, you can find patreon.com/Planet FPL, where we release a podcast each and every day, which might be useful during this Christmas break when people are twiddling their thumbs. We did a quiz today, which was all about England players with less than 10 caps. It was a lot of fun, provided by one of our patrons. And you can also jump into our Slack channel, where we have over 500 active fantasy players interacting with each other, and some prize leagues as well. So patreon.com/Planet FPL. Other than that, we'll be back at you tomorrow with Sky Fantasy Football, James. All set.
Yeah, and a deeper conversation on the current situation of women's football in English game on Patreon tomorrow. So a couple of deep conversation ones for us this week.
Fantastic. Listeners, wherever you are, stay safe, look after yourselves, and we're back at you tomorrow. Ciao for now.
I'm already regretting the things that I've missed to say on this podcast. I love you, Spurs. Cue music, please, man child.